Hi, I'm Thomas, and today I would like to introduce to you a selection of vintage chronos that we will offer in the Hong Kong Watch Auction Chapter 10. I'm here with my colleague, Zion, and we are more than pleased to start with a nice selection of vintage chronos. And I would like to start with a Breitling Reference 765 CEP, that stands for co-pilot, and retailed by Leap, a French Breitling retailer in the 1960s. The watch is an amazing example, absolutely well preserved. What I really like is that back then, you have to imagine that the reference was launched in 1953 and already had a big diameter, 41 millimeters, an attractive big hollow dial, an attractive black dial with white registers, and is coming directly from the son of the original owner. Quite funny story, because the watch was bought by the father in the 1960s, and the father was an organizer of a Tour de France. So he bought the watch during the bicycle race, and since then he was wearing over France, basically following the tour. Then he passed the watch to his son. The reference is of course fitted with original bezel that has a 5-minute division. Also quite interesting about the co-pilot is that the chronograph minute register is also fitted with 3-minute luminous decision. So basically, during the night, when you activate the chronograph, you can see every 3 minutes out the 15-minute register. The original tritium is present in all the indexes on the dial and on the hands. I would say a really nice, of course, example and a quite rare reference.
Thank you, Thomas. So over here, I have the next example that I'd like to highlight. This is a Universe Genève. It's called the Compax. There's a nickname for it called the Nina Reed. Basically, this was nicknamed after the wife of F1 driver Johan Reed. And this has been quite a popular reference among the UG fans. Basically, what is very special about this watch that I like is the tropicalized subdials that it has achieved over the years, and it's very, very well even out. So this is a property from a Japanese collector, and in excellent condition, with the archive confirming the dial configuration from UG.
The second chronograph that I would like to introduce you today is the Carrera Reference 2447T, made in 1968. The stainless steel example that I have here in my hand is absolutely in amazing condition and can be Carrera considered as one of the most iconic chronograph made in the 1960s, and precisely Carrera was launched in 1963. Quite interesting to mention that TAG Heuer exactly this year relaunched a Carrera 2447 that is really similar to the model that we're going to offer in Hong Kong. Coming from a Japanese collector, has been absolutely well preserved over the decades, and I really suggest to all the Carrera collectors to have a look at this example due to its rarity and condition.
So next on here, we have a very interesting chronograph, Excelsior Park. So basically, this is a brand that has been dated since 1866, founded by Jules-Frédéric Jeunet. Basically, movement has been sold to brands like Galet, Girard-Perregaux, and Zenith in the early 20s. This is a very nice, interesting 43mm diameter case. It's a limited edition of 50 pieces made for the Mono magazine for Japan. So on the case back here, you see the engraving, 21 out of 50 Mono magazine, anniversary of the issued 150 pieces. This is for me, by far one of the most interesting chronograph we have in the sale, with beautiful patinas, hands and dial, and it's preserved in very nice condition.
Talking about chronograph, also we can have a look at a more complicated chronograph function, that is the split second, or called rattrapante. Usually used for races, the rattrapante or split second function also has been very useful to aviation, and especially the military aviation. And here in Hong Kong, we are going to offer a quite rare Universal Genève split-second chronograph that was retailed by Carrera in Rome and supposed to be delivered to the Italian Air Force. Carrera, based in Rome, was the official supplier for the, back then, 1950s, 60s Italian Air Force. And the specs of this amazing timepiece, first of all, is the diameter, 44.5 millimeter. The watch was worn on top of the pilot gloves in order to have a better readability of the time and, of course, of the chronograph function. What is interesting about this model is also quite unusual to find in whatever chronograph, but especially in split seconds, is the 24-hour dial, and also that the chronograph minute register is divided in 16 minutes, usually are divided in 15 minutes or in 30 minutes. This specific model has 16 minutes, that is also a spec that the Italian force asked universal. Absolutely well preserved. Also, this is one of the examples, as we can see, that has been delivered to Carrera but not delivered to the Italian Air Force because it doesn't have the military engravings on the case back, so we can call it like the civilian version of this split-second chronograph, consigned by an important Hong Kong collector, and we are absolutely pleased to offer it in our upcoming Hong Kong sale. Talking about split seconds, we have another important example in this sale, and we are talking about the Brightening Duo Graf. Launched in 1940, this example was made in 1944, and thanks to the Breitling archives, we found out that exactly this reference 766 is one of the first examples that Breitling produced with a split-second function. They were made in stainless steel, in yellow gold and pink gold. And I have to say that this present example has been absolutely well preserved. The dial is almost flawless. The case proportions are still there. I really like the polishing and the brushing on the side of the case. And on the case back, you can clearly see how crisp are the engravings of the reference number and the case number. Another rare opportunity to acquire an important split-second chronograph in our Hong Kong sale.
Thank you, Thomas, for talking through the split chronograph function earlier just now. This segment, I'd like to introduce two very interesting chronographs that I have on hand. First up is the Jaeger-LeCoeur. This has been nicknamed as the Great White Shark. It's a reference 2643. This was launched in the late 60s, basically, with a large case diameter at 40 mm, using the Vaju 72 as a base caliber. Basically, what we have here that's really interesting is the bezel here is an unusual white aluminium, believed to be possibly prototype bezel, and it's preserved in great condition with nice luminous on it as well. The second example that I'd like to highlight is the Métis Tissot that we have here. This is also produced around the same era as the GLC earlier just now, like in the 1960s or 70s. What we have here is possibly one of the most well-preserved chronograph we have, probably new old stock, with the box and tag on it as well. So as you can see, the case, the finishing and the bracelet is almost like new when you buy from the store, and with the case back with no marks of opening as well. So we have one of these two highlights from the chronograph section. We'll be offering this season for collectors who love vintage chrono from the 60s and 70s. It's worth having a look at these two pieces.
As you know, I'm always pleased to talk about Omega, and especially the Speedmaster. Here we have a beautiful reference 145.012-SP, that stands for Special Poussoir, made in 1968. So can be considered one of the last Speedmaster professional fitted with a 321 caliber. What I really like about this reference is, first of all, one of the last 321 caliber available in the market, and also this reference was used by the astronauts of the Apollo program. The beautiful Apply logo is the first distinctive thing on the dial that you can recognize a 321 caliber from the later calibers. And the present example here, I have to say, is absolutely well preserved and has the original steel bracelet, reference 1039. And also what is interesting is that is accompanied by the original warranty box and instruction booklet. Something quite difficult to find right now in the market. For all the speedy collectors, I really recommend this 321 because the condition is really, really high. And moving on Omega, I'm here with the pleasure to talk about this Flightmaster in gold. The Flightmaster basically is the model that Omega designed to respond to the demand of more pilot watches. Don't forget that we are in the 70s, jet flights, Concorde started fly as well. And the Flightmaster is quite unusual for its so-called pilot case, more bulky, I would say, typically from the late 60s, beginning of 70s design. The Flightmaster here shown is fitted with a caliber 910 that is not only a chronograph but also a 24-hour indication plus a second time zone on the dial that can be adjusted by the crowns on the case. And not only the Flightmaster is an iconic chronograph by Omega made in the 70s, but this present model is the deluxe version, is the gold version that was available. And according to Omega Museum archives, 200 were made and only 20 were fitted with the gold bracelet. Mainly because the weight of the watch, I have to say, is pretty heavy, but also because it was a little bit expensive back then. So they produced more examples in fitted with leather strap. Preserved, absolutely well preserved. Offered by an European collector, the Flightmaster in gold is quite unusual to have in an auction catalog. So we are extremely pleased to offer this present example in our upcoming Hong Kong sale.